Hello, and welcome to another exciting edition of Victory Never Sleeps. I'm Witten Daniel Young. I am standing in for All's Hero Gothi Matt Flavel. No, Matt didn't lose all of his hair and shrink 100 pounds overnight. So, tonight's broadcast is coming to you live from YouTube, from Entropy, from Twitch, from the platform formerly known as Twitter, Rumble, VK, and Odyssey. On Friday, you'll be able to catch us in podcast form on Apple Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. I believe that is it. Well, tonight's stream is going to be a bit of a heavy one. For those of you in the United States, you may or may not be aware of the devastation that Hurricane Helene caused in the Appalachian portions of the Carolinas. And I know some of the folks that maybe live a little bit more toward the center of the country or out west, and when they think of hurricanes, they often think of the devastation that is a direct result as far as the coastal cities go. What you may not know is that when those storms begin to make their way toward the Appalachians, they slow down and they dump catastrophic levels of rain. And where I live in central South Carolina, and during that storm, we saw 10 inches of rain here, and we saw riverbanks bust, lakes overflow. But our neighbors to the north and west of me had absolutely catastrophic flooding and devastation to levels that were nearly cataclysmic. Whole towns were lost. Lives were lost. And while many people sat on the sidelines and looked at those images when they came up on the Weather Channel or CNN and thought, man, I wish I could do something. Two young men who are beacons of nobility in the Asatru Folk Assembly decided they weren't going to sit on the sidelines and decided that they were going to take action. And with the help of your generous donations over the past week, two young men you see on the screen with me and a few others decided to band together, travel cross country for some, and decided to get their hands and the face in the mud and come down south and be able to help those folks out in these communities that were virtually inaccessible to a degree which when I lost contact with my folk builder in Western North Carolina, Tyler Bethea, I took a night off work, called my boss and said, I'm going to go up to Hendersonville and go visit with a brother of mine that I've lost contact with. And I got sent links to the North Carolina DOT services that said Western North Carolina was inaccessible. That every major highway that fed in from my part of South Carolina and into where he lives was absolutely destroyed. So with that being said, I'm going to kick the ball over to my guests. Folk builder Tyler Bethea from North Carolina and Tyler Heinlein from Montana. Both these gentlemen are of the finest sort, two guys I'm super proud to call my friends. And I'm really excited to share their story with all of you tonight. So Tyler Bethea, why don't you tell us a little bit about the direct impact that this storm had, specifically where you live?
Sure. Appreciate you having us on to give folks an update and to let folks kind of hear the story of what went down out here. So let me say that hurricanes have not really had a whole lot of impact on our area in the past, as you were saying. Part of what made Helene as bad as it was the fact that for a couple days prior to the storm itself, we had quite a bit of rain. As a matter of fact, the week prior to the hurricane, I was in Montana for our national event out there, the Freyr's Harvest Feast, and my flight home was delayed a couple of hours. And on my flight home, there was a lot of turbulence and stuff as we were trying to fly through through all the turbulence and all the storm clouds and such, that I did not know were going to be dumping all that rain on my home. So between all of the rain that we got in the previous days and then the rain from the hurricane, we saw, I believe, 2 feet of rain. There were trillions of gallons of water dumped on our region. My father-in-law, he came over today and he told us that he had read a report that there was enough rain dumped on our region to cover the entire state under a couple of feet of water. That is huge, and when you combine that with all of the high winds that we had, I think that the wind was almost as devastating as all the water was. Everywhere I went, there were down power poles, trees. There is not a road I've traveled on between the border of South Carolina all the way up to Virginia or Tennessee that had not had snapped power poles, lines in the road, and the debris of the trees and such, just everywhere. That's part of what made this as bad as it was that a lot of roads were impassable. I live on kind of a top of a mountain, so in my area, all it was all the trees and all the damage from the wind. But anywhere that was close to a creek or a river or a lake, even just a ditch on the roadside, they the damage from the water was just beyond anything I've ever imagined. When you have a river on the coast or anywhere that's a low-lying area, the rain will cause the river to rise, sure. But when you add in all the mountains that we have around here, you have all the rain above that has to go down low as well. And with that, you get mudslides. I've seen whole mountainsides that have just washed away into the valley under it. And I think that's been the number one cause of death that we have had around here is the mudslides and the landslides. They've killed whole families. They've trapped whole communities. And being an Appalachian man, it has been heartbreaking. I'm not going to say that anybody else who came in, they didn't have their hearts broken as well. But for us, it's not just human devastation. It's the fact that our landscape around us that we love and has become part of our soul has irrevocably changed. Like you mentioned, earlier, there are whole towns that don't exist anymore. Whole communities that have been wiped off the map. A lot of the images in the slideshow, like the horse farm that we were on, where you saw the images of one of our members, the rebuilding of a fence. You saw us working on a horse barn. That like whole the pasture area, all of that was under about 12 feet of the water. So the water there would have come up over that heavy equipment there, plus about 2 to 3 feet. When I got on site and I looked at the water line, it blew my mind. And what the pictures there don't show you is that when you go to the river bank, it's kind of like a bluff, and the river at the normal flow is about 12 feet under the bluff. So the river came up 12 feet to the bluff, and then it continued to rise until it covered everything by, I'd say, about like 9 feet or so.
Hmm.
and I've never seen that much water. We lost power at my house for it ended up being about a week. But the people down below me, only a mile and a half away. So, like I said, I live on the top of a mountain. But when you got down to the bottom of my road, that's the Hungry River, and that river just it just it destroyed everything in its path. The people there, they were without power for about 3 weeks. Um, they're not going to have a bridge to their little community of about 20 homes. They're not going to have a bridge there for an untold amount of time. They've been quoted $2 million to rebuild their bridge, and because it's a private road, the government is not going to handle that for them. So 20 households have to come up with you know, $2 million in order to be able to drive a vehicle out of their home. And this is not an isolated incident. There are hundreds of these cases. So yeah, we've done a lot of work. It's taken a lot of work to get to the point where we're at now. But I would ask that everybody try to keep this in the fourth the forefront of your minds. It's pretty easy to with the way that we consume the content and the news and such now, to where it's always we focus on the next thing and the next thing after that, and we don't take the time to think about, I wonder how the people in Appalachia are doing now. You know, the wintertime is right on our heels, and a lot of these homes are heated by the propane and such, and that's how they've got their gas stoves, they've got their gas logs in the fireplace, all this stuff, and the propane trucks, they can't go to a home where there's no bridge. They can't go to a home where there's no road because of a landslide anymore. So these people are going to have a very hard winter. So I would ask that in the coming months, you continue to try to reach out to people, and you continue to ask the questions of, what do you need out of me? How can I help you? Because these people are going to need a lot of help in the coming months.
So I'm glad you said that because it's like you said that with the way that media and information is consumed now, that everything comes in 15 and 30-second clips. And a lot of times we don't see the forest for the trees. This is going to be a long road to recovery for those folks in Appalachia. And the work is just beginning. You were talking about private roads and private bridges and millions of dollars that they're not getting a lot of relief for, especially nothing coming from the federal or state level. A lot of it's coming through private donations. So the other gentleman that's joining us tonight joins us from Montana, Tyler Heinlein, one of our folk builders up there, an outstanding young man. Tyler, can you tell me how you found yourself wanting to take part in some relief efforts in Western North Carolina, and tell us about that journey for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were monitoring the situation because Tyler Bethea was right in the path, and we've been waiting to hear from him. And about 24 hours after the storm, we started whispering, hey, maybe we need to send someone to check on him. Let's see if one of the local guys can get a hold of him. And within 48 hours of the storm, we had finally heard back. So we finally had on the ground intel, and we heard how bad it was, and it was a pretty straightforward decision. The gentlemen that helped me with this whole thing, they are my brothers in a fraternity we run, and one of our missions is to help our folk, and it really is a requirement of our men. We require a minimum of 40 hours within the year of service to our folk to even be part of this thing, and this is just what we've been preparing for is something like this, to where we can go and make a real difference for our people. So as far as our response went, within 48 hours, we were planning concrete moves to actually get men on the ground to actually provide help with search and rescue, and then rescue and recovery, distribution of supplies, cleanup, reinstatement of utilities, managing lost livestock, repairing fences so those livestock can get back to their farms, getting these people's livelihoods saved if at all possible. And this is a process it's very fluid when you have a situation like this, and it's important that we get there as soon as possible. And that was one of the frustrations I had, was how late I was in my departure, because we had to get a vehicle for this work. So I actually purchased a vehicle that had the proper lift kit, the winch, the off-road capabilities in order to actually get through these areas, or I wouldn't even have made it to the site. As it got later on, some of the bigger roads opened up and we were able to get more people in. But initially, these roads were either roadblocked or completely destroyed and wiped off the map. It was over 48 hours of driving when you factor in having to go pick up the vehicle and then making my way down. But I would say about 33 hours were spent from my departure point, once we had the vehicle and all the supplies gathered up, and we drove down to actually getting there. And that was about 6 extra hours of driving just to get around all the roadblocks, the destroyed bridges, the washed out highways. I think people need to understand the scale in which we're talking. Is that Bethea and I, when we were going around to get these jobs done, the driving was the hardest part. I mean, don't get me wrong, pulling down a widowmaker that's blocking a road and about to crush a house is difficult. Going and hiking and supplies is difficult. Searching areas is difficult. But that's all sweat equity that you're paying in. It's not a matter of time. And time is just getting eaten away as you try and get to these locations. You go down the road and you got a local boy, riding co-pilot, and he's telling you to take a right here, and there is nowhere to take a right. And we got to rework the plan. And, now we're looking for a new road, and that road's gone. We find another road, and we go, well, we can get through, but it's not really a road. But that's where the off-road tires come in. So we had to really pull our heads together more than anything in the beginning. Is how are we going to get supplies there? How are we going to pay for said supplies? How are we going to get our guys there? Who can go, and how fast can we get them there? Now, we started off with a small donation gathering locally, and that quickly became the AFA store running a proper donation, avenue. And with that, we were able to raise quite a bit of funds, and that got us tools and supplies and food, and that made a huge difference. The thing is, a lot of people can't drop everything they're doing, drive 3,000 miles away, and get their hands dirty. It was hard enough for me. I just finished a national event. I'm supposed to be preparing for winter. I got kid on the way and two under two already running around their mother's feet. It was a lot for me to step away. But a lot of people can't step away. A lot of people have obligations that don't work for that sort of thing. They can't get the time off work. They don't have the luxury of having a stay-at-home mom that can take care of their kids. But they still found ways to help, and that was through donations, because those donations aren't just dollar signs and cents. What the donations got was food in small bellies. It got water purification tablets and anti-diarrhea meds to people that had tainted water or no water at all. It got blankets to families that didn't even have full roofs on their home. What you're talking about is a few dollars, meaning the difference between someone's worst week in their life and the best day of their life. Because a small teddy bear, even if it's 3.5 inches and a can of soup, after all of that, that's the best thing they could have happen. And it seems silly because it's such a small thing, but knowing that people care is essential. We're not just dealing with an issue of natural disaster. We're not just dealing with a lack of power. We're dealing with a population that's lost hope because no one's come for them. I think the words I heard a lot were from other people that came down to work were, FEMA didn't, we will. And I'll leave the politics out of it. The simple fact is, we showed up. People like us showed up. Where was everyone else?
Right. Right. And I think I was helping provide some oversight along with y'all's here, Gothi, on the donations coming in. And I may not have the exact number, but we raised in excess of, I believe, $5,000 to help those efforts. And it's like Mr. Heinlein said, that, you know, we sacrifice what we can, and these gentlemen decided to sacrifice sweat, equity, and time. And all we asked was that people sacrifice their hard-earned dollars. You know, people were also donating, I believe, supplies also through a store-run fund, and you know, all of those things are an act of devotion toward trying to help our neighbors out. Again, myself living in central South Carolina, I mean, the rivers here are still absolutely swollen with Appalachian mud that's still, you know, it's washing down from 120 miles north of me. We saw swamps overrun, and nothing to the level that they saw up in Appalachia, but it's still like a trickle down effect. Everything that dumped in that area is washing somewhere, and it's actually washing down here. So before we go any further, I want to recognize GW Farnsworth donated us 5 coffees. Thank you, GW, for your donation. And we're gonna do a couple of the questions. Owl of Omens asks, I have a question. Did you guys witness any federal interference in local relief efforts? Bethea, I'm gonna let you take that one.
Okay. So personally, I have not witnessed any direct interference. From the people on the ground that are still operating, we have a guy from Indiana, an AFA member, who he came down 2 weeks ago. So he's been here for 2 weeks, and he has not left. And he was down the weekend prior to that. He had come down to help out with with an organization who he linked up with. So he had come down the previous weekend, then he went home for a while, then he came back for 2 weeks, and he's still out in the field. He's actually camping out on location in order to be there the daylight to dark. And because he has the ability to go do these things 24/7. I don't. I've got a family. I need to be home at night. I have a job. I've got to work now. He has told me that there have been areas where the government this may be a little spicy, okay, but I think truth is important. It's one of our virtues. Government employees of various organizations would drive up like in a pickup truck or a van. You know, they're not hauling anything other than their lunches and their waters and such. And they'll go to a donation site or a drop off where people, citizens, that's who's been doing everything, is the people who live here and the people who come from Montana, Indiana, Georgia. The things everybody will bring in, they would go and take pictures with the supplies that were donated. They would go and pick up a case of water and have their picture taken, or food and such. So that is a thing that has happened. I trust my source on that. There have been a lot of rumors. The rumor that I heard that has been discounted was that the government had gone into one of these isolated communities that was built on a river. All the roads in and out had to be on a river because they're at a very high elevation, and the mountains there they're rugged to the point where you can't make a road in there. There wasn't a reason to make a road on these high mountains. So all the roads and all the houses and such are built on the river, and so all their bridges are out and they're completely isolated, and you had to either hike in or you had to be dropped out of a helicopter, which is what happened with the government guys, as the rumor goes. The rumor says that the government had gone house to house to get supplies that people had donated, and they hoarded them all up in a local school, and they put the razor wire on the top, collectivized it all, and told all the residents that you had to come here to get things, and we will pass them out. That is not true. The person who told me that, he asked me for supplies for being kind of off grid. I'm an outdoorsman, so I am well stocked. So I hooked him up, and he thought he would have to like hike 12 miles, and he didn't. He drove all the way to the middle of town, and none of the rumors are true, right? So there are a lot of rumors that are going around. There are rumors that the government has their roadblocks, and if you're coming in from out of the area, they will turn you away. That is not entirely true. I know that the path from out east of us, the direction of Charlotte, Raleigh, and the coast and such, that's been open for pretty much the whole time. We had a member of the AFA who lives in the Wilmington area. The hurricane hit Thursday night, and he was on my doorstep Wednesday morning, and he stayed for a number of days. And he drove all the way in. He brought a bunch of stuff. It wasn't the confiscated. He didn't hit a roadblock or anything. But to the west of me, Tyler Heinlein, arriving 10 days after or so, he came in from the west side, and he hit 3 roadblocks. Now he was able to navigate that, but they were actively asking folks, why are you coming in here? What is your purpose? All this stuff. So there are a lot of rumors, but the important thing to remember is that a lot of it is just rumors, and that fear mongering and anti-government sentiment is going to be present anytime there's any kind of a disaster or anything. I will say that anytime I have personally witnessed the government on the scene, whether it be the National Guard or the government agencies, they have been acting in either a traffic cop kind of role, or they have just been observing. I have not personally witnessed any of them the rolling up sleeves to get to work. I've not witnessed them passing out anything. So that I will say, but I don't really call that interference. More like just the machines of the cog are rusty and in need of a lubricant.
No doubt about that. So I'm going to go on to pull up another question here. The Wolf Throne asks, when natural disasters like this happen, do you attribute it to the wrath of a god like Thor, or do you believe there are malevolent Jotnar behind these disasters, or neither? That's kind of a complex question. I'm going to say neither. These things happen. I think when I look back to when I was younger, I'm in my mid 40s, so I came up during like the rise of CNN and national cable outlets that broadcast news year round, like the Weather Channel. And I remember in 1989, 88, something like that, South Carolina got struck by Hurricane Hugo, which was a massive storm that absolutely just plastered the coast of South Carolina and all the way up into Charlotte. And I remember thinking how wild that was. And I remember that felt like a very isolated incident because we weren't as over-informed as we are now. And that's not to suggest that the storms haven't picked up in frequency or something like that in the years since then. And I'm not a geologist, or I don't study weather, so I'm not an expert in any of these things. But I do think we're in a warming period, and I think that plays a big role in a lot of this stuff, that we've seen more and more catastrophic storms in the southeastern United States. But no, I don't think that's. I don't put that on the divine, and I don't put that on these supernatural beings. I think it's just a natural occurring thing. Though I am not a god, so I don't know. They haven't told me. Sierra asks, after being boots on the ground, what supplies you say are needed most currently? I'm going to ask Heinlein to pick that question up.
I would say right now, coats and blankets. We're kind of in this mid-game where a lot of the initial crises have been averted. We have good running water starting to flow in a lot of places. In fact, we were helping one of the families that was the lead engineer on getting one of the reservoirs back, and we helped get his animals re-fenced in, and we took a lot of the burden of his troubles off so he could go perform work that we just did not have the technical capability to do. And so now that we have water flowing, now that we have power coming back to places, there's still communities that are completely isolated, and we're just going to still continue to get them the same supplies, food, water purification tablets, all that. But for the most part right now, we have a lot of people that are not going to have any access to good heating come this winter. So warm clothes, blankets, that sort of thing. It's going to be November as soon as you blink. And you blink again, it'll be December. These people are going to be cold. I think there was 15 deaths first night it dipped below frost point due to hypothermia, and that's not going to get any better in areas that have received no sort of relief.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo that also. I know a lot of the folks that don't live in the southeastern United States, they have a general picture or view of the climate here. The Carolinas is a unique place that we have like the central and coastal part of it that's more subtropical. You start getting into the Appalachians and all that, it shifts a bit. It's the Appalachia mountain chain that keeps the central part and eastern part of the Carolinas as humid as it does, because it helps keeps that coastal air trapped over this part of the state, or both states. But when you go up into like the Mount Mitchell area, it's like a completely different climate than you have in the rest of the Carolinas. Tyler only lives about 2 hours away from me, and I have left my house at 10 in the morning to meet up with him for various AFA activities, and have seen the temperature drop 25 degrees just going up I-26 and into his area. So it is a drastic difference in the climate there. So they get actual winter up there, whereas this part of the Carolinas is particularly mild. Mm-hmm. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that? What supplies you think are needed most currently, Tyler?
So my guy on the ground here, Tom Denton, he popped into the YouTube chat here on the side. I was just looking at my phone here to see the comments, and he mentioned that the number one item that has been asked for is the buddy heaters. So if any of you have got the resources to procure heaters, whether you want to donate a heater or you want to donate some money, please contact myself or folk builder Tyler Heinlein. I believe that Nick could probably put our email addresses up here on the screen for you guys. Please to reach out to us. Although the AFA fundraiser is now over, we do accept donations, and we will make sure that we are able to procure heaters, and we are able to get them into homes. I know the other day the temperature at night dropped down into the low 30s, high 20s, and we actually had snow at our higher elevations. My guy on the ground here told me that he had personally witnessed a house that had a hole in the roof, and the family was living inside still, covered up with all the blankets that they could muster, and it was snowing inside their house, and they had small children. Um, my people are a proud people. Um, they're not going to leave. So as long as they remain obstinate and want to tough it out, we need to provide comfort to them. Um, so yeah, I mean that that goes back to when I talked a couple of minutes ago about how this is going to be an ongoing effort. It's going to be an ongoing in endeavor, and please don't forget our people. So I appreciate you asking that, Sierra. I would say heaters. You need to think about winter supplies. I will add a note to that. Is that a lot of have asked that if you do clothing, it needs to be new. Um, so I know that your heart may be in the right place to go into your closet or your dresser and to pull out all of your warm stuff and say, I ain't worn this in a year or two. I'm just going to donate it. They're not going to accept it. And clothing, they've got mountains of it. So what is really going to help is like propane bottles for the propane stoves and the buddy heaters. That is the number one thing, is buddy heaters. So anything that is not electric, because there are still places that don't have power. But I do believe that for North Carolina, anyway, I don't know about other areas, but for North Carolina, power is back for the majority of people, other than those who are the most remote or cut off because of the landslides or the bridges out. So just to hedge your bets, a heater that does not need to be plugged into a wall to work would be a boon for these people. So yeah. And while I've got the floor, I do want to give a shout out. You were mentioning earlier how it wasn't just the monetary the donations; it was supplies as well. There were a lot of folks who donated supplies that we were able to get in here. I know that one of our members in Georgia, Jace Cameron, he came out here for a number of days, and when he did, he brought a lot of donations that were gathered by the Georgia guys that are around him. People like the Russ Henderson, the Gilbert Page, people like this all around him. Jordan Wells, his the brother and his wife. They pulled a lot of donations, and he brought that stuff up with him. The Rachel Kinsler, her house was used to receive a bunch of the donations by mail, because the mail here was, as you could imagine, it was not running. So it was not possible for donations to be mailed to my house, even though I'm kind of in the middle of all of this. So donations would go to her house, and Tyler and I were able to make a drive, up there through all the detours and such in between us. We crossed the mountains, and we got a hold of the donations that were at her house that were also donated by members in the area. And they brought down a bunch of stuff as well. My living room was absolutely full to the brim of the donations, the cases of water, food, blankets. We had a big box of blankets, propane, the gasoline to put into generators and such. There was just a plethora of things that were donated. So I did want to mention that as well.
Awesome. So let me ask this, guys. So when you were on the ground, what was the response like from the locals that you guys came into contact with? And let's start with you, Heinlein.
It was overwhelmingly positive. It's everyone pretended they didn't need help. That's just the nature of the area.
Of course,
but once you talked to them for more than 5 minutes, they told you exactly what they needed. And it's an area that has a large amount of elderly people, and they just don't have the back strength to do a lot of the work that need to be done. So there was this one lady who, 74 years old, living up in the hills, and her spring wasn't working. And she had a little generator running thing, so she was in better shape than a lot of people. This was fairly early on, so she was in good shape, but she had no running water, and there wasn't a water supply point anywhere near her. So when we got there, Bethea and Jace Cameron got to work behind the building, clearing just this maze of brambles, all the wisteria and the ivy, and just wraps around these trees. And when the trees come down, they become one giant tangled mess. So we're talking about a 7-foot tall pile of trimmings that were just a maze. And while they cleaned that out, I worked on getting the spring up and running. So I ran the water lines through, got them operational, and then we did a little jerry rigging with the generator and the well, and we got it all hooked up. So by the end of it, the power company was going to be able to come out and hook up power, because all it was waiting on is just the brush clearing. And she had her spring operational. And then we brought out a little packet of instant coffee, and you should have seen her face. She hadn't had coffee since the hurricane. Now, I'm a firm believer that you shouldn't ever become too fond of any vice, no matter how mundane, but I think in that case she deserved her coffee. And it's these moments like that that really just show what we're able to do with a very small amount of work. The responses were always just overwhelmingly grateful for how lucky they were compared to everyone else. That was the predominant attitude. Is, we met a rancher who 26 feet underwater, his entire property, which is just an unfathomable amount of water. Just to think of the scale. And he was able to not be there when it came through, which is why he was talking to us. But he said to think of how fortunate I am when the rest of my neighborhood was not so lucky. And it's just this attitude right here really encapsulates the initial attitude. And then as far as our work goes afterwards, it was, thank you, you're doing good work. You don't know how much this means. You'll never know how much this means. And it was on to the next job where we got the same treatment. I mean, it's hard to describe, because you can never do enough to feel like you've done enough.
Oh, no, don't I know it?
But to be able to do anything, it's one of the best feelings in the world. It's hard to explain to people that haven't gotten their hands dirty how rewarding it is to put yourself out there, put yourself on the line, and get these types of jobs done. And they're dirty, filthy jobs, and the air quality in certain areas were horrific. We went through a town where for a mile and a half around the funeral home there was ash coating cars because it was running 24/7. I try not to talk too much about the grisly parts of the job, and that's obviously a limitation on some of the pictures we don't have, because there's a lot of the work wouldn't be appropriate to take pictures, and that's another thing. Thinking back, he goes, "Oh man, I wish I took a few more pictures so people could see what this was like, so they could understand how much they helped." But at the same time, while you're doing it, you're frustrated that you're even stopping to take pictures.
Yeah.
There's so much work needing to be done.
Well, I think a lot of that, getting the message out there through visual means is absolutely necessary. Because I think we live in a day and age where we don't trust everything we see that comes across our screens, whether it's from social media or national media or international media. We can't always trust what we see, but we see images from our guys on the ground, looking at the just sheer devastation of the area, and it brings a level of realism that I think a lot of people don't take these things seriously. Like I know when these hurricanes strike the Florida coast, and we've got a lot of folk that are in Florida, and we'll hit them up ahead of the storm. Hey, you guys going to be okay? And they're like, we deal with this all the time. But the folks in the Appalachian area that weren't expecting any of this, and a lot of times, again, because so many of our people don't live in this southeastern coastline area, they have a general idea of what these tropical storms and hurricanes do. But what they don't realize is what happens when they push that far inland and still maintain the level of strength that Heinlein did, and just the sheer devastation that it wrecked onto the Appalachian area. And I've got personal connections up in that same area. My mom is from Oconee County, or she's from the Piedmont foothills area of South Carolina. So a lot of the places that we saw the devastation at, places I'm very familiar with. I spent a lot of time in my childhood and the years since. Like Chimney Rock is gone, and that was my mother's favorite place to take me all the way up until I was a teenager. My great grandmother lived on Lake Hartwell, and I spent a couple of summers up in the Oconee County area, which is right there in the the foothills of the Appalachians and all that. So that stuff's in my blood, and I have a passion about taking care of those folks up there, because those people are my people. And although I wouldn't call myself an Appalachian guy, but I certainly am descended from Appalachian folk. Those are my mom's people, and those are my people. And seeing two of our guys being the face of this just fills me with so much pride. I've got on a personal note, I've got some personal connections to both of these gentlemen that you see on the screen. Both of them have been mentored by me at some level or another, and seeing them put themselves out there and put themselves in harm's way, because that's something that we haven't talked about yet, is that just driving up there was absolutely dangerous, life-threatening. And not to mention the stuff that these young men were doing on the ground. It was absolutely dangerous. And, chainsaws, electrical lines, and standing water and stuff like that. I don't need to go into all of it, but, these guys were putting their asses on the lines to get out there and do some stuff, while a lot of folks sat on the sideline and just, I wish I could do something. Well, these guys decided, if it ain't going to be us, then who's it going to be? So we're going to go back to some more of the questions. And scroll through here a little bit. Gothy Trent East asked, did you gentlemen hold any sort of bloat or ritual for the folk during your relief efforts? And I'm going to expand on that. Did you guys get together for prayers beforehand, or did you guys imbue this with any religious practice? And I'll start with Tyler Bethea.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever one of our members, he came up, actually with all of our members who that came up, we did have prayers for our safety, but also prayers for the people that we were going to go and help. This was not done publicly, of course. A lot of the people around here are very religious, but not the way that we are. This is an extremely Protestant area. As a matter of fact, one of the places that we did the majority of our work with in the early days was a local Baptist church that are some of the finest individuals I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. And I can't tell you how many times I was prayed over by a Baptist preacher before I got going on my work, which I'm grateful for. That man's heart was full to bursting with a love for his people. So that did not offend me in the slightest. But on an Asatru note, yes, we did do prayers. One night, whenever we had the majority of our members together, well, I say the majority, we had 3 AFA men who were also oathed into the Odinic, order. So we did a bloat to the high one, and part of that bloat was expressing our gratitude that we got to help these people, and a recognition of the, what's a good word, tenacity of the people that we were going in there to help. You know, they may not be of our faith, but there is a circle of our in guard in which these people absolutely abide. They uphold our morals, they uphold our traditions and such, and it was an honor to be with them. And we prayed that our efforts would be blessed. We prayed that what we did pleased our ancestors and pleased our ICer. Then on another night, when we had some more of our members around, there were 4 members of the AFA there for this one. We held a sumble, and with the sumble, we talked about almost everybody had a blood connection to this area or to the Carolinas in general. Many heritage Americans do, whether you live in California, Idaho, Arizona, or Mississippi. At one point, your ancestors that came through the Carolinas.
Yep.
And we honored them, and we spoke to them and asked that they bless our endeavors, and we just hope that we made them proud. That was a huge thing. I talked about one of the men I hailed was my wife's grandfather, Papa Donnie, and Papa Donnie was an Appalachian man to the core. In his earlier years, he was a hard drinker. He was a hard swearing man. He was just everything you would expect out of a hard Appalachian man.
Yeah.
But in his older years, he settled down and everything, and he was very wise. Papa Donnie did not have a lot of education, but he was a wise man, and he loved his people, and he had a heart of service and such. And that whole time I thought about, if Papa Donnie were alive now, what would he be doing?
Oh yeah.
How would he have responded to all these things? And I knew what the answer was, and I knew that I needed to make him proud. I knew that I always had the good relationship with that man, but I wanted to think about it in the context of if he was here now and he was witnessing the husband of the granddaughter, what would he want to see? And I tried to make sure that I lived up to his standards, and to the things that he would have done. Even as an 80-year-old man, he would have been there with us. He would have been driving his little truck. He would have been on a 4-wheeler. He would have done all he could. And so if an 80-year-old man could do all those things, then I better do it too. But to get back to the original question, the Go the East, yes, we maintained an air of piety in all things that we did, and we understood that we were not there alone, and that everything that we were doing was being watched. And hopefully I hope that we built a lot of the reputation and the bright fame in the eyes of our ancestors and our gods.
You certainly did amongst your peers. All of us are, again, swollen with pride from the effort that you guys have put into it. And for those of you who don't know, Tyler Bethea is the embodiment of the spirit of Appalachia. I don't want to call Appalachian folk rugged individualists, but they are doggedly independent. Don't want no help, don't need no help, won't ask for no help. But they'll be the first to jump in and help. And when I talk about Asatru being a religion of action, that represents, that's represented through the spirit of Aryan being. We're about action. We're about doing. Our first ancestor that stood on the Caspian steppe and gazed upon the setting sun and asked himself what lies beyond that horizon, and decided he was going to push that way, and led generation upon generation of men and women further west and further toward that setting sun. That spirit is very much reflected in the spirit of the folks in Appalachia, and nobody represents Appalachia better than Tyler Bethea does. So, Nicholas Gunn asks, are there any avenues still open for further donations? Well, I think the AFA's official fundraiser for this has closed. You can feel free to donate to runestone.org and just tag it as relief, for relief efforts. And we'll see to it those funds go to the proper hands to make sure that people get what they need. Sierra asks, how did you figure out who needed help? Was a post made, or did you drive around until you found people who looked like they needed help? I'm going to let Tyler Heinlein take this one.
So there's quite a few community organizers that were getting work tickets in, if you will. There was a couple Baptist preachers collecting information. Local bars operated as information. You had a lot of these opportunities to get jobs, but the thing is, one thing led to another. It doesn't matter what organization you worked with, whether it was local or not. Once you got a job, inevitably the neighbor needed something, and then you'd hear from that next neighbor that someone else needed something. I think it's fair to say that there was more work than there were hands to do all the work, and it's just a matter of going bit by bit, job by job, and you do one job, you have 10 waiting. There was no shortage of work to be done, and there's a lot of bad information out there. What areas were good, what areas were not good, and oftentimes those were inverted in reality. But as you go from one location to the next, you're not driving with your eyes shut. You see what needs to be done. You see people in need, and that's how we formed our plan. To bring it back to the question of did we pray, did we hold bloat and such, I'd like to say that, I hadn't heard it said, and I want to make sure it's said, that the entire time we were there working was an act of ritual. We were putting our intention into our folk. We were putting our beliefs at the forefront of our actions. I think people talk a lot about what Asatru is. They read the lore, they ask some questions here and there, but for the people that came out and helped me, for the people that drove the various distances they did to come out and get their hands dirty and help their people, I want them to know that that was living Asatru.
It's positively an act of worship to get out there and get your hands dirty and sacrifice blood, sweat, and tears in the pursuit of the betterment of the people around us. We want to be good neighbors in every avenue, whether it's around our hofts, around where our kindreds are based, around, our varying places of residence. We always want to be good neighbors. We want to be the best representatives of Asatru we could possibly be. And I think also that it's just that we're good people. Good people want to do good things. So next question comes from Russ. What moments of your volunteer work were particularly spiritually significant, aside from bloats and stumbles, of course? Tyler Bethea.
I had a moment before Tyler Heinlein or Mr. Cameron came out. I was with one of our members from the Wilmington area. He had come out in pretty early days, and we had hooked up with the local Baptist church, who these guys were running all the missions and such. They have a radio station where the people could call in, and they had a big whiteboard where they would put all the missions and then all the people available with all of their skill sets and such, and then they would put the person to the mission. And one of the jobs that we were tasked with was actually right here on my road, and we were told that this was an elderly lady who she was a teacher at a local school for years and years, and that she was, up there as a widow, up there all by herself, and that she was running out of gas for her generator. Turns out it was a Generac generator, and it takes propane, and we weren't ready for that. We brought in a bunch of gasoline, but I knew that that bridge was, out to get across the Hungry River, which is a substantial river. And we were tasked with that job because it's my backyard.
That river's only like
So
100 yards from your house, correct?
no, it's about a mile from my
Okay.
house. Yeah. That's where I deer hunt. Is down in there. That's where our the game land starts. So that's at the border of the government land,
Okay.
which goes all the way to the border with South Carolina. You're actually able to get up on the Blue Ridge Escarpment, and you look down, and everything is flat. So
Yeah.
it's like the very edge of the mountains. But anyway, my partner and I, we took big backpacks that would be used for like hiking on the Appalachian Trail. These are 80-liter backpacks, right? And we went up to the ladies at the church. They were running a massive distribution hub, and we had them just load us down with all the food, hygiene items, all these things, and we were ready to walk in there. So we made that journey down to where the bridge was out. We crossed the river there. We parked our vehicles, put the backpacks on our back, crossed the river. There was a footbridge there at that time, scaffolding actually, and we walked across that, and we're on our way to walk in, and a man on a we call them side by sides here. It's like a UTV that's 4-wheel drive. It's like a 4-wheeler hybrid type thing, right? I don't know how to explain it to you, but there was a local man on that thing, and he asked where we were going with the backpacks, and I gave him an address and the lady's name, and he said, "Well, I'm her neighbor. Why don't you throw your bags in the back, and I'll ride you up there." So we were appreciative of that, and we headed up to this lady's house, way up at the top of the mountain, and lots of parts of that road were kind of unpassable if you didn't have kind of an all-terrain vehicle. And we got up there and we knocked on her door, and as soon as she opened it, she had tears in her eyes and was just so grateful. She was happy that somebody cared, that somebody remembered she was up there. And we told her that we had brought a bunch of things, that Pastor Philip had asked us to come out there, and we offloaded all the food in her garage, and we laid out all the stuff, and we're like, any of this stuff that you don't want, that you're not going to eat, all the cans of Spam, I made a joke, like my wife would turn her nose up at all that Spam, so if you want me to take that back with me, I will. So we let her pick through all the stuff, and I repacked my backpack, and we stayed there for about 2.5 hours while this lady just showered us with affection, and told us about how she hasn't even gone out there to the river where the bridge is out. She's not left her house in a week. And the spiritual experience in that for me is that we're coming up on the winter nights. A lot of us have already celebrated the winter nights. My kindred and I will be doing that this weekend in Eastern Tennessee. Quick plug: if you're in the Eastern Tennessee area and you'd like to attend the winter nights, email me at my email address. I'd love to see you. But a huge part of the winter nights is we honor our Deseer, and our Deseer are our female ancestors. And my grandmother was a little old lady. She was so frail and so small the whole time I knew her. You know, whenever I met her 32 years ago, she was a little old lady. And I saw my grandmother in this woman, and her mannerisms, the way she spoke, the way she treated us like we were small children.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, oh, Shug, I don't need all that. You know, you boys are so generous and everything. You didn't put yourself out, did you? And all this, it just, I had to hold, I had to hold my tears back because it was just such a profound experience of how grateful and how loving that woman was. Her house was fine, you know, she was fine. She was just lonely.
Yeah.
She needed a visit with some people. Then the no power and stuff. She lost her husband years and years back. Her kids had not been up there. Her grandkids had not been up there. It was just her neighbors who they checked on her and stuff. They made sure she was okay and everything. But I think that if you go trying to find the divine in everything, you're going to be disappointed. But if you go at things with an open heart and an open mind, and you allow things to happen to you, that's when you're going to have a spiritual experience. And that was my experience. Was I saw my Deseer in this woman, and I would hope that if anything like that had happened to my Deseer, that there would have been a young man there who would have helped her out and who would have just given a listening ear while that woman talked for 2.5 hours. You know, because
And I know
that's
from
what she
dealing with
needed.
folks like that, you know, a lot of times just having company means the world to them. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you could have brought no spam and no peanut butter and no nothing for them, and just the fact you showed up on their porch just to check on her and all that, she's probably still talking about you right now. I can when you said that all Shug, and I don't want to put you out, and I heard my mother and all that. So we've got some questions rolling in, but I want to ask that same question to Tyler Heinlein. Was there a moment during your volunteer service that you felt was particularly spiritually significant?
Absolutely. So I think the work we did that was the most impactful lines up with this question really well. We went to a farm that did equine therapy for veterans. That was their bread and butter. They do trail riding and all that, but what they really do is they go out of their way to make sure that when our young men come back, and they don't come back quite the way they should, that they have an outlet. And so this equine therapy is the taking care of the horses, the riding the horses, the getting away from things, and really bonding with an animal that doesn't have all the weight that the rest of the world does have. And this family, all their kids are grown, or as the lady said, all her babies were out of the house. You know, they had flown the nest, and they were quite something. This couple, they got to celebrate their 52nd anniversary in a motel while their house flooded. That was how they celebrated their 52nd anniversary. It happened the day of the hurricane. All their horses found good dry land. Their outbuildings weren't so lucky. Some of them got picked up and carried literal acres away and smashed into oak trees before they stopped. Quite a lot of the pictures of some of the work was from that farm. That's where we did the fencing. That's where you see those outbuildings up on their side, hung up by fencing, that sort of thing. It's also the picture that was put on the AFA Telegram channel, and I'm sure other platforms as well, where there was 4 guys in identical shirts and the 2 couples. I'm sure Nick can find that if we give him enough time. But
Really great.
with that, they did equine therapy, and that meant that helping them not only helped a really good family with a really good heart, it meant that we helped an entire organization and all the veterans families. So we were able to impact quite literally over 1,000 people by just helping this one location out. And that feels good, but that's not where the spiritual impact came from. It happened when I was talking to the owner of this house. We went back out there a second time to help jack up his house. So we had these bottle jacks, and we had the owner's brother there, who was a structural engineer. So at least we were doing things a little less sketchy than we could have. We were still pushing the boundaries a little bit, lifting a house of bottle jacks. But I was talking to him about it, and this family had built this farmstead from scratch. They milled every single bit of wood on site. They hand pounded every single nail. They built this before screws were an affordable commodity. Power tools were not something that they had access to when they built this, and they put every piece of fence up. They built all the barns, all the buildings with wood they had milled, and they did this together. This is a couple so in love that the husband lied about his age to get married. He also forged his mom's signature. So he was not 18, he was 15. But you know what? I guess he was ready for it, because he built a beautiful life with this woman, and they seem to be one of the happiest couples I've ever met. I'm talking to him under his house as we're spray painting beams that are broken or damaged or dry rotting, feeling a 2-story house above us while we did so. And we got talking theology, and I didn't shy away. I have nothing to shy away from. A lot of people want to tiptoe around and beat around the bush with any of their religious beliefs. Doesn't matter if you're Muslim, Christian, Asatru, whatever you want to be. There's a lot of people that aren't comfortable talking about it. But me and him, we talked till birth. We talked long and hard about religion. And in the end, he said something to me. He goes, you know, my God sounds a lot more like your gods than the other Christians would say. And he had this moment where things just kind of clicked a little. He said he's probably too old to change his ways now, but he feels like we were on the same wavelength. And just having that spiritually affirming moment for him was powerful for me. So hopefully that answers the question well enough.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think that trying to find common ground with people in times like this, where we can pull together and try to help one another, is vitally important. And I think what that man probably heard in our gods echoed in his soul, because it had already existed there. And I think whenever his time comes and he passes beyond the veil and he realizes that he's not going where he thought he was going, and his ancestors are going, all that will come full circle by that time. So, no, that's beautiful. And I think, again, the spirit of generosity and hospitality that comes through in Asatru, and seeing that reciprocated and the spirit of being grateful is a beautiful thing to hear. And that, I'm fighting back misty eyes through a lot of these comments. So, I mean,
if you'll indulge me another, I think there's another one that I think people could get some benefit from hearing, if we got the time.
We've got all night, sir. Go for it.
The Odin bloat that Bethea mentioned was an Odin bloat that I took quite a lot of time to prepare for. I wasn't wanting to do it too quickly. I wanted to take my time, get myself in the right headspace, and really be intentional about it, as you should before bloat. But I felt this one was very important that I take the time to know what I was doing. And the thing I asked for was discernment. Just a little bit of help with discernment of what we needed to do. And we were coming back from that lady's spring that I mentioned, how we got her running water. And on the way back, we saw 2 goats in the road. And they were side by side, running the length of this highway, like they could have been pulling a chariot, if you will. And they ran along the highway. We stopped and we got them off the highway. And in doing so, we got them back under their driveway, and we saw the down fence. We figured, let's get these goats back, and let's see if the owners want help fencing. And we moved them a bit further on. And we saw scattered goats everywhere. We saw chickens and ducks scattered everywhere, and we kept looking, and we kept seeing worse and worse situations. There was a plethora of down fence, a lack of feed. There was one rotten hay bale that wasn't going to be food for anyone. There was dead livestock in an abandoned home. And we took our time to try and figure out what to do. We corralled all the animals away from the home, tried to get them contained for the most part. But we're talking about chickens, ducks, a single goose, goats, pigs, everywhere. And they were thin. They were wasting away. I'm really surprised that all of them made it in the end. But these goats, they were sustaining themselves off of English ivy, which causes bloat real fast. And that's probably what killed one of the goats that was lying on the ground. And it was a rough spot. But luckily we knew some people in the area that we were able to get a animal trailer to. We were able to coordinate with another farm and get these animals to a place where they could eat good food slowly and build themselves back up so they didn't kill themselves from overindulgence. They were able to rest up, and they've all been got back into to a good place, and they're not in threat of dying anymore. But the thing that was interesting to me is there was exactly 9 goats. We asked for discernment, and we saw in front of us 2 goats leading us in to a place that we needed to be. And we saw 9 goats in the end, and I think that they wants to touch up on this too.
The only goat that we saw in a fence, he was in the chicken run, was a lame goat. He had a bad leg. So that was also significant. So for the audience, for those of you who have not picked up on it yet, Asatru, he rides in a chariot pulled by 2 goats. And in the lore, there's a story about one of the goats. If you butcher the goats and you eat them, but you lay all their bones out on the hide and you'll hallow them with a hammer, the goats will come back. And Thor had given an edict to these children that he picked up along the way that do not eat the marrow out of these bones. There was a little boy, he broke a leg bone, and he got the marrow out of it. So when the bones are hallowed and the goat is back together again and it has the lame leg, Asatru knows what had happened there. And I thought it was very auspicious that the 2 goats were the ones who led us in, and then we saw one with a lame leg, and then we spent 2.5 days on that operation after the night before having a bloat where we directly asked the Allfather for discernment and for a mission, and the next day we were given a mission. So yeah, just wanted to add that in there. The lame goat.
Auspicious indeed.
I think it's important to realize that sometimes it's just a crow eating a french fry in a parking lot. Sometimes birds of prey just follow combines because combines chop up little animals. It's not always a sign. It's not always this grand mythic quest you're being sent on because you saw a bird move in the same direction as you drove towards the fishing dock. Sometimes a bird's just a bird. But when you do get that moment, when you do get that little bit of nudge and you see those signs, you know. So if you're looking for some direction, just take a breath and look twice. Sometimes they're just eating a french fry. But every once in a while you'll get a powerful spiritual experience where you get to see an answer very, very clearly. And I'll share another story with you about me and my little brother and an experience we had. So this was our second first harvest feast. So this was a few years back. And we were driving back, and I had both my little brother's presents for this, but one refused to partake in bloat. So in the car is my pregnant wife, myself, my little brother Aaron, and my little brother Brian. And we're driving along the highway, and it's boring as can be. And then a cougar comes and leaps across traffic, 6 lanes of traffic, just lopes like nothing. For those of you who haven't seen a big cat move, it's like a little cat, except for they clear feet at a time. It's insane how quick we got across that freeway. But what struck me was we've been talking about how this was real to my little brother, and he was coming to that conclusion. But this is the first time he had been in bloat. I saw, my wife saw, my little brother Aaron saw, but my little brother Brian, who stayed out of bloat, didn't see the cougar. He was going around and rubbernecking it, looking for this cougar for about 5 minutes after. He was convinced there was no cougar. Well, these little moments happen, so you just have to be ready for them.
The other thing, Tom, that you mentioned too, that sometimes a crow is just a crow, and it's not always a sign. But I think if you find meaning in that, then it is real, no matter what it is. Sometimes a bee is just a bee, but if you find meaning in that particular thing, it shows up at the right time, then it is real. And a lot of times too, you won't know the significance of it until after the deed is done, or whatever needs to come to pass comes to pass. But and the same thing works as far as like runic divination. That a lot of times the message may seem clear in the moment, but it's not until these things have come to pass before you realize that what you thought was coming didn't happen. And looking back in hindsight, you recognize what it was trying to tell you. So Nick Gunn asks, what can we do to be more prepared for emergencies like this in the future? I think, and I don't live in the Appalachian area. I live in the flatlands of central South Carolina, but I don't know how you can be more prepared than the folks are in Appalachia, because they're very self-sufficient culture there. And I'm not talking about the folks inside the cities and stuff like that, but the mountain folk there that highly self-sufficient. But I think, besides just trying to get out before the storm comes, and Tyler Bethea touched on this earlier. A lot of those folks are dug in. They came there to get away from the sickness of the modern world, and some of their folks have been up there for generations upon generations upon generations. My granddaddy lived on this hill. I ain't leaving it. But I think the best way to be prepared is be prepared to help each other when these disasters strike. Be ready to roll your sleeves up and help your brothers out that are struggling. Be ready to dig deep and donate to causes that actually put the funds toward the charities that they say they do, rather than keeping a percentage of it. That's something I'm glad I brought that up. That's something I do want to bring up. A lot of times when you donate to these bigger organizations, whether they're government run or through private means, if they raise say $10,000, there's only a couple of thousand of that will actually make it to the people that actually need it. Countless thousands of dollars go into the pockets of the people who organize those fundraisers. That is not so with the Asatru Folk Assembly. Every penny that we raised went out to the guys on the ground to make sure that this work got done. And the work has really just begun. But I want people to understand that when R.L.'s Harrier Gothi runs a fundraiser, we don't keep a portion of that, whether it's for the South African Fund or whether it's for disaster relief like this, or whether it's families in need. We don't keep any of that. All of that goes directly to the folks that need it. But
I have a comment on that.
Tyler, go ahead and pick up on from where I left off there, bud.
Yes, sir. So another spicy take. You got me on the show. You're gonna have a little bit of spice if I'm allowed to put a little bit of pepper on it.
Nick's got the shepherd's
We have
hook
a lot of.
to mess up. So
All
I
right,
mean, Matt's not here, so who cares?
yeah, go
so
for it.
we have a lot of our detractors and such. In I'm not going to call them Asatru because they're not Asatru. If you're not AFA, then you're not Asatru.
Preach.
But in the broader heathen sphere, we have our detractors who will say that that the AFA is grabbing your shekel and taking your money, and that we're some kind of like televangelist group. And I'm here to tell you that that is not true. Anything that we have ever asked for money for, if you would take 5 minutes to look around at the things that we are asking for your donations for, whether it be a project to build a steeple, whether it be to install statues of the father of modern Asatru and his wife, who is still extremely active in our church, or the steeple project, or the relief fund. Your money goes directly to these things. And I, for one, am exhausted to the point of nausea with all the detractors that say that we're just out to to grab your money and that we pocket it, and whatever all the rumors are. You know who you are. I know you're listening, and I hope that our relief effort is kind of irrefutable evidence that your money goes to what we tell you it goes to, and
Every
that
penny.
the things like what we just did, that is not possible without the money. I don't like money either. I don't like the whole system and stuff, but we have to have the money to make it happen. If we had no donations for this project, we would not have been able to purchase the fuel and the bar oil to run our chainsaws. We would not have had gas to drive around all the roadblocks for a trip that should have been a half an hour is now an hour and a half. So that means 3 times the amount of gas. We wouldn't have had that gas. We would not have had any meals. We would not have had anything to hand out to anybody. There would have been no blankets, no propane. None of this would have happened. So I hope that with that slideshow there, and that you don't count us as a pack of liars, up here just telling campfire stories that are completely false. I hope that you believe us, and that what we tell you that we actually did, and that your donations went to what you earmarked them for. Yeah, I mean, that's my hot take of the night is just.
And
I
it was
think that people.
It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't like a portion went here or a portion went there. It was right around $5,000 went directly into this.
Yeah, and I mean all total, combined, all the money raised, we raised right around $8,000 by all avenues, and we used almost all that money. There's a little bit left over, and it will be earmarked for the next time that we have a disaster that our folk encounter.
Yep.
But I mean, we raised $8,000 in a span of 2.5 weeks.
Yep.
Because of the giving heart of our folk, and that is where your money went. It went to this. And so I for one would like to see all the naysaying about the finances stop.
Well, not only that,
all the Telegram channels and all that stuff.
I want to ask those people, what have you done? Could
So
you?
Where were you?
that was what I was
Where
going
were
to
you?
piggyback off of,
Right.
because
Yeah. Where were you when you were asking for that donation?
one of my favorite bits of our lore is the story of the ferry, where we have Odin in disguise and Thor trying to cross, and they get into a little bit of an argument over their deeds. One starts off, says a great deed, where were you? The other responds, and where were you? The phrase, and where were you, has become a bit of a mantra for me. I try to live my life in such a way that when someone has a problem with the way I live, all I have to say is, and where were you? So for these opportunities, this one being a very clear one, when you have a problem with the way the relief effort was done, if it's genuine, come to me, tell me, we will workshop, because we are preparing for the next one, because there will always be a next one. And I'm looking forward to the day where there is a response that is adequate for what we're doing. But for a couple guys in the woods with the limited time and supplies we had, we did a great thing. So I ask, and where were you? To bring it back to the original question of what can we do to be more prepared for the next one? When we talk on a personal level, I want to share a story I was conferred to just yesterday that came out of Bat Cave area. Little girl, 14 years old, got stuck in a car with her father. The tree pinned the car shut and down. They were in a drying up riverbed when they landed, and this tree blocked them from egressing. Well, she had to stay in that car for a couple days. I only mentioned her staying in the car a couple days. They were both stuck in the vehicle, but she was the only one there that had any fight left to give. So she had to sit in that car with her past father, and the only reason she lived was because her father was a man of forethought, and he put a 72-hour kit in the back of his car.
Yeah.
So she had dry clothes, food, and water because he was a thinker. You want to ask us, what can we do to be better? On the personal level, it comes down to personal responsibility. Just be aware that whether it's a snowstorm power outage or a Venezuela-Bosnia situation, doesn't matter the scale, it is your responsibility to take care of yourself and your family. A couple small steps can put you in a good spot. 72-hour kit in a car, save that little girl's life. Might be something to consider. That's on the micro. On the macro, what we're doing with the Odinic Order of the Opidnar is we are making steps to be more prepared. So out of the fraternity's funds that are raised from our own members of the fraternity, to just be clear, they're not coming from your guys' funds, we are putting together kits so that our members all over have a backpack ready to go, where they have the tools, the resources, and supplies to throw it on, and they are covered. They can go and they can do relief effort within 24 hours of a disaster hitting an area. Another thing is some of our guys are looking into additional training, and there'll be some certain certs that get attached to our names to where when we hit those roadblocks, all we have to do is show our paperwork and we get waved right on in and we're given a section to work. These steps are long-term steps, but with everything that I do, I try to do it with the most bang for buck. We're doing it as quickly as we can, and when the time comes, we'll be double, if not triple, prepared from what we were this time. I think a 48-hour response, gathering funds, gathering men, gathering supplies, and getting down there as quickly as we can was good for our first proving ground. But there will be another one, and we will be much more prepared. In the meantime, do us a favor and make sure that if you're going to be in the area that has a disaster, which I know you don't have a lot of control over, be one of the people that when guys like us knock on your door, you go, oh, no, I'm good, but thank you. It means a lot that you came here. So-and-so needs help. Don't be the person that had nothing because they didn't think that the grocery store might have to restock eggs. Just think about these things ahead of time.
Well said. All right. So Russ asks, how did this experience change the way you think about and speak to others about tragic and traumatic events like this in the context of Asatru? I'm gonna let Bethea take that one.
I lost you there, Whitten Young. What was the question, sir?
How did this experience change the way you think about and speak to others about tragic and traumatic events and like this in the context of Asatru?
So one thing that I have talked about to multiple folks is 3 concepts. 2 of them are virtues, one being self-reliance, the other being victory, and one of them is a concept of in and guard. When you get your rune stones in your inbox, make sure that you read all those articles, because I focus on that a good bit. The in and guard concept. The people I spoke to who are of our folk but are not of our faith were actually talking about the in and guard concept without knowing what that word was. They talked about how they cut their way out of their house first, then they cut their way out of their neighborhood, then they cut their way to the main road, which is what we did here. We cut our way out of our driveway. I had the trees down behind my vehicle. I could not get out of my driveway till I cut those trees up. Once I got to my road, right in front of my house was an enormous red oak tree down in the yard. My neighbors and I cut up to that tree. We go down the road. There's another tree. Then there's a power pole. Then there's another tree. We cut all of that out as a collective. Then we go to the main road. There are huge trees down that are blocking the main road. We're working on the one side of the tree, and a fire truck and a the utility, the company truck, are on the other side, and they're working on that end. And we go out and out and out and out. This is what I heard from a lot of the Christians who are in the area here. Were talking about in and guard. They were talking about, I dealt with my family, then my neighbors, then my community, and it reverberated outward in a series of concentric circles, right? Which is, often how we do explain the concept of in and guard, is concentric circles that reverberate outwards. So I guess that to get back to the question, has it really changed the way that I think about things? No, but what it has done is it has the reaffirmed the way that I think about things. In and guard as a concept, self-reliance, the fact that you are no good to your community and to the people around you until you are a self-reliant individual, and you are able to rely on yourself to get yourself out of things, and then you're able to apply those same skills to your neighbors, your community, your family, etc. This just like the concept of a fasces, right? A fasces is a bundle of sticks or rods that are around an axe in the middle. All the rods around that axe are all of us, and we have to be strong individual rods. But one individual rod, that's easy to break. Now, the stronger of a rod you are, the harder you are to break. But if all the rods in the fasces are stronger rods, then we will be absolutely unbreakable. We will be as hard as concrete, right? Then the concept of victory, or virtue of victory, the 10th noble virtue that the AFA has added. I have seen victory after victory in the past almost a month now, where there has been no obstacle that we could not overcome if we band together as a unit of men. At one point, a couple of weekends ago, I got a message that 2 organizations were going to be in the area that are pro our folk. One was the Nationalist Coalition, and the other was the Patriot Front. And a couple of the men in those organizations, they knew me and said, "Hey, you're a local, you're on the ground. Can you come out with us? I said, of course. You're here to help us out. I'll roll with you. And what you had was you had a band of men from all over the region. I think the furthest away guy was out near Indiana, all the way down to like Georgia and such. But all these guys are there. There's like 22 guys. But every one of these men had a self-reliance. They were strong individuals, and they banded together as a collective, and we were able to pursue victory. And every task that we tackled in that day, and some of them were very dangerous. There were guys who were, I mean, we had our med kits on the standby because I did not have high hopes that everybody would walk away from that unscathed. But we were able to make things happen, and we were able to be victorious. So these are concepts that I have tried to speak about to the people that we have worked with, for the people that we have worked for. Self-reliance, victory, and the ending guard. I would say those are the main concepts that have been reinforced with my worldview and my spirituality.
All right, well done. You know, as far as the ending guard concept is, we take care of our own. That's an Appalachian concept too. So, all right, the Wolf Throne asks, question for all three: which of the celebrated Asatru heroes, old or new, are you most inspired by, and why? Let's start with you, Heinlein.
Yeah, so I think the easiest one for me to point to is Eagle Skull Grimson. I just can really appreciate the steadfast and tenacious nature of a man who does what is right no matter the cost, who is uncompromising in his convictions, who's willing to bite the throat of someone that would cheat at a game even. It also helps that I'm a direct descendant of Eagle Skull Grimson, and he's a name I utilize in Ensemble often. So I think if the world had a lot more men that were willing to be intentional about their beliefs, that took their virtues as a way of life and not a hobby to talk about, we'd have a lot more boots on the ground when we needed them in North Carolina. So Eagle Skull Grimson, unwavering tenacity and loyalty to his own virtues.
It's a good choice. That's one of my favorite sagas. How about you, Tyler Bethea?
So mine was also, Ale, but another one that I would say would be Prince Herman of the Cherusci. Again, all the work that we've done here and the cooperation with others who are like-minded in their Weltanschauung, but may not be like-minded in our faith. I would say a lot of inspiration that I draw out of him was his ability to band together all the tribes when they were faced with a common threat. They put the folk first, and that is of paramount importance, especially in the wolf age in which we find ourselves. I know that our founder, he's talked a lot about the wolf age and how the times that we find ourselves can be scary and intimidating. And I try to think about Prince Herman, how intimidating it must have been to have to face the Roman legions. The modern equivalent of that, imagine you are in Iraqi in the face of the Desert Storm. I mean, it's just the overwhelming the power of that is just beyond anything that you could imagine. But to have the grit, to have the fortitude to stand against that, and to say, enough's enough. My people have suffered. They have bled, and it's time to fight back and to you know to to drive the foreigner out of our lands and to unify our tribes and our clans as one people is very inspiring. And I have thought about Herman a little bit in the past weeks about how the majority of the people out here are Appalachians, and the overwhelming majority of the people out here, I would say 99.9% of the workers on the ground are folk. Their politics are all over the place. They're all kind of on the right, but the politics are everywhere. The religion is kind of everywhere, but at heart, we are one folk. Ethnically, we are one folk, and I've watched our people just stand so united against this the 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 common enemy, which has been the hurricane. Um, it's been very inspiring.
So while those gentlemen were talking about Asatru heroes that they're most inspired by, old or new, I would say I'm most inspired by Radbod, specifically for that moment where he was in the baptismal pool, and the priest promised him that once he took the baptismal oath that he would get all these treasures in heaven. And he asked about where would his ancestors be, and the priest tells him that they would be burning in hell because they were heathen. And he says, I'd rather burn in hell with my kin than to live in luxury in heaven with a den of snakes. So I mean, that generation of Asatru, that generation of our people, faced obstacles that we don't understand. It's not to say that we don't face dangers for being who we are openly and honestly, but we certainly don't face the blade the way that those guys did, and they faced it with dignity and honor, and with the nobility expected of an Aryan man. And honorable mention would be living hero Stephen McNallen. He, I can't imagine the guts and the intestinal fortitude that it took to wake up one day and say, everything I've been taught is a lie, and I'm going to strike out on my own. We're going to start a religious movement right now. Could you imagine that, being the only guy in the world, at least in his eyes at the time? I'm going to start a whole new religious movement by myself, and look at where how far we've come as a result of that vision. Things have evolved and been tweaked along the way, but it all starts with that vision. And you could even go further back to Von List and Rudd Mills, and keep on pushing backwards, and you still find those guys. Those men were visionaries, and I admire that. Aaron Simbeck, he asks, what resource, save for more hands to help, did you guys find was most needed in the disaster area? I'm going to let Bethea take this
one. Other than the more hands, a huge thing that was beneficial was the resource pool. Being able to pool funds. A lot of folks were bringing in supplies from kind of all over, whether it be water or food or clothing. There was a pretty heavy amount of that. I don't think I went anywhere where there wasn't a stockpile of goods. But when you have a stockpile of goods, there's always a thing that is missing. And that was where it was a benefit to have a stockpile of funds. A lot of places did not have that where they could pull on a pool of money. There were times where we let the Alls Harrier go through and know that, hey, we need to pull out X amount of cash. We need hard dollars in order to make some things happen. And there were no questions. It was just, okay, go. And we were able to pull the cash out and go take care of what we had to take care of. Like when we had all those animals that we had to find a home for really fast on the fly, I was able to call up a buddy of mine who has got a local farm. He's got room on it. I helped him to put the fence up, right? So I knew he had all that pasture land that he didn't have no animals on. But we needed to cover his gas. We needed to cover a little bit of time off of work that he had to drop everything. I was like, hey, here's some gas money. Here's some feed. We went and we were able to procure animal feed and all these things in order to make that happen. That would not have happened had we not had cash. So I would say that other than having hands or the boots on the ground, which is the main thing, absolutely, we need bodies on the ground here. Other than that, we do need cash. We need an account that we're able to pull from to pay for things. The farm's just the one example. There were times where we had to procure the tools on the ground in order to make things happen. When we got that lady's water turned on at her spring, there were a couple of items that we had to procure. We had to go to a hardware store, had to travel a good bit just to find one open that hadn't been washed out in a flood. But we needed to procure items in order to make that happen. And again, if we had not had the cash at hand, we couldn't have made that happen. We would have had to call around to people to see if they had the parts that we needed. But because we had a pool of cash, we were able to go to the store, go make a purchase for the things that we needed. So yeah, I would say that having that monetary pool there was absolutely paramount to our operations.
Awesome. Tyler, can you tell the folks what the situation was like whenever you would go to a store or something like that? Because I remember talking to Emily a day or two after you guys got comms back up. I mean, people were like struggling to find places like get pet food and baby formula, diapers, and stuff like that. How scarce was that in your area, and how far out did you guys have to go to be able to procure some of those items?
So obviously, as the time went on, more places kind of opened up and had availability. But in the first week, it was really dependent upon who had a generator that could power an entire store.
Yeah.
And who could get a truck in from a warehouse to restock shelves. Because as you can imagine, when folks had their driveways to cut out and they were able to make it to a store, stuff did not stay on shelves for very long. So what we found was the best bet was to drive to the south for about an hour till we hit the Greenville area, South Carolina. I'm not going to say that area was wholly unaffected. They were not completely unaffected. You've got the Reedy River that runs in the heart of the city. It exceeded its banks. It caused a lot of damage. All the wind and such, it knocked down a bunch of trees. It took a bunch of power. But a lot of the outlying areas were a little bit better. So what we did as a family is we would go to Traveler's Rest, and
I've got family.
We'd go down there to get a little bit of groceries. We'd go down there to get gas, because if you tried to get gas in the region of the western North Carolina. For about 2 weeks, there were gas lines. I've never experienced that before, but there were gas lines where you would wait for hours in line for gas and just to get to a pump and the pump to be off, and they're telling you there's no more gas. The gas truck will be here tomorrow.
Right.
So that was a huge issue. There was a lot of travel outside of our region. Luckily, the two main highways that go south were open pretty quickly. There was Highway 25 and Interstate 26. Both of those got opened up pretty quickly. And another thing is the phone service.
I remember
Folks
this.
don't think about that.
This was the
Yeah,
first
I know you.
scared me because I couldn't get a hold of you. And that's when I started sending emails out. I was like, hey, I've lost contact with the Betheas. We need to figure out something. And I even called like the emergency services in your direct area. And I didn't get like a regular busy signal, but I got like that rapid busy signal, like the lines didn't exist, like bomb, 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 nothing. I called.
It's because the lines did not exist.
I called fire. I called EMS. I called the sheriff's department. I called, whatever the local substation was. Nothing. Couldn't get anything. So yeah, that was pretty scary when we couldn't get a hold of you guys. But thankfully, you guys got comms back up in about 2 days, if I'm recalling right. And finally got word that everybody was whole, but but the area was in bad shape.
Yeah, and that was a huge issue up here. Is that the storm hit, and I remember I woke up Friday morning, and I had slept in a little bit because the night before I got a message from my boss that this was prior to the full force of the hurricane.
Right.
Full force of the hurricane hit overnight Thursday night, but up to that, there was enough flooding and such because of all the rain that we had had. That wasn't even the hurricane itself. It was just kind of the outlying parts of that. There was enough of that to where the rivers had exceeded their banks and such, and our boss called them work off. So I said, I'll sleep in. It's no big deal. I can't tell you how many times in the past couple of years I've gotten alerts on my phone that flash flooding warning in effect, and it's never anything. I live on the top of a mountain. It's not a big deal. So I woke up Friday morning, probably about 8 o'clock or so. I go into my living room, and my kids are on the back of my couch. They've got the windows, open, and they said, "Dad, come look at this. It's the leaf apocalypse." I look outside. Yeah. And there's no grass showing. It's all leaves everywhere. And the wind was so just intense. It was blowing leaves all over the place. So there was a carpet of leaves where my grass was. A couple of my apple trees in my orchard were down. I don't have an orchard anymore, by the way. All my apple trees are down. And so I looked at all of that. And I said, "This is kind of ugly, guys." And I was able to get some of the messages out, and I was able to look on like X, formerly known as Twitter, and I was able to look on Telegram, because those are the two places where I get my news from, because I don't have a TV. And I began to understand that my region had been severely impacted, and I had no idea, because it just happened overnight.
Yeah.
So not long after that,
they call it that for a reason. It happens in a flash. That's why they call it flash flooding, because it happens so fast. Because we were affected down here. I mean, again, not near the same level, but we had no power, and I live in Camden, just north of Columbia. We had no power in Camden at all for about 36 hours. We had one operational grocery store, and it had, I guess, was generator powered or whatever. And that's when it occurred to me. It was like, I need to check on my boys out, in the western part. and I couldn't get a hold of you. And like I said, I dropped an email to the rest of the team. It was like, hey, I've lost contact, and that's about when Heinlein started talking about, okay, I'm going to start gathering up resources and people, and we're going to try to get down there. But I'm glad you guys made it out whole, and I know there's probably some emotional scarring and stuff like that just from the experience and everything. But you guys made it out whole. Your family's intact. Your family is very much part of my family. So yeah, I'm glad you guys made it out okay. And that leaf apocalypse thing, I could totally hear your boys saying that too.
Yeah, and Dan, one thing was so the phones, they went out at about noon. Once we had begun to realize how bad things were, I didn't think that I would need to to like tell anybody, hey, we're okay. So we didn't do that. But I do remember I was having a conversation with somebody. I forget who it was, but I dropped service. It was just gone. And it did not come back on for about 40 hours or so.
Yeah, we lost you for about 2 whole days.
Yeah, and the next night, so Saturday night, at about 11 o'clock at night, I'm in my bed. Power's out. It's hot. Trying to sleep and stuff, and I have a house full of dogs, and my dogs start going nuts. And my wife's like, I think somebody's here. I was like, go to bed, hush. I'm trying to sleep. There ain't nobody here. And but we've got all of our windows up, and again, there are leaves everywhere. So there were leaves on my porch, and I could hear the footsteps on the leaves. It's like, damn, there's somebody here. There's somebody on my porch. And I saw the beams of a flashlight coming in my windows. So I grabbed the closest available firearm, which happened to be an AK-47, and I started headed towards my front door. And my wife grabbed a flashlight. I said, "Turn that thing off." I said, "You're going to open the front door and shine that light at eye level, and on the count of 3, open that freaking door." And she opened it up, and I brought that rifle up, and she got the light like right there. And it was my best friend Jordan. He was there and going, "Don't shoot." I was like, "Why didn't you knock on the freaking door like a normal person?" It's like, "I didn't want to wake your kids up." I was like, "You wake the kids up, or you get a hole in your chest, man. Which is the better alternative here, right?" And so we brought him in the house, and he was like, your mom, Emily's mom, everybody has been reaching out like, we have not heard from them. Why don't you go up there? Because Jordan's a lot like me. He's a very self-reliant, individual. He's the guy you call if you have a problem. So he made it up there. He had mud all over his truck where he had to go off-roading to go through, apple orchards and such in order to get to our house. But he made it there, and we were real grateful. And he took us to Walhalla with him. He loaded all of us in the back of his truck. We drove to Walhalla. We picked up a generator. We got eggs. We got some meat. We got some milk. All that kind of stuff to do us for a number of days. We came back up, hooked the generator up, and life was back to reasonably the normal. Now, we didn't have lights, we didn't have air conditioning, but we had food, and our food was cold and all that kind of stuff, and it was fine. But yeah, it was really interesting because we had the no phones in our area, but if you drove an hour south, boom, you had phone service. So I drove down south every day to try to folk build a little bit, and then I realized that just wasn't going to work. And so I said, hey guys, I kind of need some time off. And that ended up being almost a month of me not doing my AFA job. And I said, well, if I'm not able to do my AFA work, which is how I serve my folk, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to relieve the pressure on the people around me. And that's when we started the disaster relief stuff. It was like, I've got to do something. If I can't do the AFA thing because my phone's not working, then I've got to do something because my people are hurting. And luckily, I had enough of my brothers in the AFA who they felt the same way, and they felt that call, and we were able to have some good help. So really grateful for all the people who donated, either of their money or of their time. Y'all made a huge impact. I don't know if you realize how much of an impact all of you had, but you made a huge dent in a lot of lives. So I appreciate you.
Awesome. And shout out to Jordan. I hope you're listening to this, watching this, and you hear my voice. We've got a spot for you. All right. So Russ asked, was there a particular God who you feel was with you throughout this work, supporting and guiding you? I'm going to let Tyler Heinlein take this one.
Yeah, so without a doubt, I feel like this was the opportunity I needed to forge a better relationship with Thor. It's not something I had taken the time to do beforehand. I'm a fairly strong guy for my size. I'm smaller though, smaller frame. But I think tapping into being able to go out and help these people and really immerse myself with people I did not know, I was able to kind of forge that relationship I didn't have before. I think it was a good experience for me spiritually, and it certainly was a good experience for those we were able to help. And we had a lot of opportunities to talk to people about our beliefs. And a lot of people asked us, well, you're wearing those shirts with those funny words on it. What is all that about? And so we got to talk, and it's interesting because Thor was the first point of reference they understood. And they inevitably ask, is that like that Marvel show? And you go, no, it's not like the Marvel show. Okay, let me learn you something. And then we'd sat down and talked. I say sat down. We put another fence post in, and we pounded dirt with 2x4s until the fence post held. But we talked during that process. We go, no, okay. Thor's not really a comic book. Just like there's no Captain Allah or Jesus Man comic book that would really be appropriate to reference divinity with. And we kind of backed off a little, and they're like, well, what's it about? And we talked, and we talked a little bit of cosmology. We talked a little bit about the stories. We talked a little bit about belief system, morality, all of these things. But it's interesting that the starting point, and not just because of common culture, but the starting point was Thor. So that's my answer.
How about you, Tyler Bethea? Do you feel like a particular God was there with you, or did you feel a particular connection with a particular God to help with your efforts?
So I saw the question in the chat earlier, and trying to think on it, and I don't really think that there was a particular God that I in the way that it wasn't just one, there were elements of a handful, I felt some Odinic, elements in that, kind of in the way of like auguries. I'm not one to really get into auguries a whole bunch, but I'm not in a region that has a bunch of ravens. but there were times when I would help. There was one time in particular where I helped an old man, and I heard the ravens, and they just would not shut up the whole time. It was almost a distraction. And this is an area where I've never heard a raven before ever. Plenty of crows for sure, but never a raven. And I just heard ravens constantly. And this old man was laying out plenty of wisdom, and that had me thinking, had me contemplating Odinic concepts and such. And there were times when I'd be with an old woman and I'd think of Frigg. I would think of all the maternal elements and such. And Asatru was a constant. That was a constant because of the strength of our people, the resilience, the working man, the small people. That's who we were there for, overwhelmingly. So no, there were many. I wouldn't say that there was only one. There were quite a few of our Aesir who had an influence, and not only our gods, but one of our runes as well. I remember speaking with Witten Young whenever we were beginning our work in earnest. He talked about the rune, the Kinaz, and how we needed to bear the flame. We needed to bear the torch, the light of our folk, the light of our church, and the light of our Aesir out into the world. And we needed to burn bright for our folk, for our gods, and the AFA. And that was a rune I meditated on constantly while we were doing our work, was how can I be a beacon? How can I be the bonfire on the mountaintop? How can I light the way for our people? And it's not like I was, out there trying to proselytize for our faith or trying to be some kind of evangelist or anything, because I really wasn't. A lot of times we were paired up with a church, and I'm not trying to convert a devout man. I'm there to meet the man where he's at, and I'm there to work with him. But one thing I did kind of constantly is I tried to make sure that our focus, as we did this work, our focus was on our people and how much our people, they need our help, and how we need to be an example for everybody around us. I tried to meditate on the principles of the Kinaz rune. So
I want to touch on that a little.
Sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
One of the things that's cool about Kinaz and how we carry that, it's about the way that I see things. It's about carrying that torch beyond the illuminated path. It's going into the dark, into the darkness where there is no illumination. It's being that guy that lights up the room that was previously, not illuminated. We were going past the safety of the torches lit by the people that came before us. It's about being the guy, pioneer almost, the first guy there on the front line, bearing that torch, bearing that banner, bearing the burden of our people and our gods. And that torch is lit within. We all have a divine spark that was given to us at our inception, at the inception of our people, and has been passed on from our Allfire all the way down to us. And it's about carrying that torch beyond the illuminated path, the one that was illuminated before us. It's clearing the brush, clearing the trees, putting down torches, and lighting the way for the people that come after us. And it's also about being a beacon of nobility. It's about being a beacon for who we stand for. And, like Tyler was saying, he wasn't out there trying to proselytize. Now, if we happen to convert a guy or two, awesome. but most importantly, he was out there as a representative of his ancestors, his gods, and his people. And he did that through bearing that torch, as did Heinlein. And the other guys. We haven't name dropped a bunch of the other guys. Those guys are just regular members. But we want to give shout outs to those guys too, and they know who they are. One of them was at my house, a few days after, and actually he went back up the day after he was at my house to help with one more day of relief work. And cool young man, awesome, and he just joined our church. And rather than just join the church, we're like, okay, now what? He went out and decided to put his hands on the shovel, put his hands on the plow, and get out there and get stuff done. And for a guy that young, that's pretty impressive. I appreciate you bringing that up. Tyler Heinlein, do you have something to add to that?
I do. That young man that you mentioned just joined joined up. Well, it's funny you mention him because he showed a lot of really good inner strength, both the work weekend and not. He had this little post. It was a post workout picture, and he said, "Out here saving the world one day at a time," or something akin to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was all fired up because we had seen some nasty things that day. And I go, you know what? We need some guys on the ground. I'm going to call some people out. So I ruffled some feathers in the men's chat. Just, hey, if you're able, where are you? And I see this, and I go, you know what? I'm gonna push the envelope a little. And I responded, hey, if you want to save the world, I got a small chunk in need of saving. And he messaged me with, what do you need? When can I show up? And we went back and forth, and he came out. This is a man working 2 jobs, providing for his son, raising a good boy, and raising him well. And he dropped everything to come on out.
Yeah.
When people say, hey, I'm Asatru. Thorshoff has some of the best words we have.
Words are one.
Iron. And he showed up, and he showed that he belonged to Thorshoff. So just wanted to give him a shout out since we brought him up, because that man, he proved his mettle.
Yeah, that's a good young guy. He came with his fiance to my house for a book study. His fiance is brand new to Asatru, and rather than go through the book study that we already had planned, we went through the Trulog Mall and just kind of taught her the basics and all that, and sat and did a small, pretty intimate ensemble. And I could tell there's a lot of richness in that young man's soul. I'm really glad to have him on the team. So Jace asks, what is the AFA and the Odinic Order of the Ulfhednar doing to be prepared for the next tragedy to befall our folk? I think that was kind of covered before, but Tyler Heinlein, would you take that one, please?
Yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to provide a clarification. The fraternity, the Odinic Order of the Ulfhednar, only accepts prospects that are AFA members. So just a point of clarification, this is one and the same. There is, it's kind of like all trucks are vehicles, but not all vehicles are trucks. Just figured I'd want to clarify that we are not some 2 separate entities here. The AFA is our church, our community, our home, and the Odinic Order is just a group of guys that were within that want to dedicate themselves to specific causes that we have done. So with that clarification, what we are doing is we are establishing within the Odinic Order, we're establishing members that are going to take on higher training. So Bethea can cover the individual training a little bit better, but it's making a few of our guys woofers, getting a nice big certification and all the knowledge that comes with it. But as far as the AFA, we now have a functional disaster relief chat with people that have practical knowledge and people that have the ability to coordinate for these things in the future. That chat's not going away. The greatest thing about it is we can just simply put in people that know what they're doing, and then when a disaster hits a region, we put some local guys in, we handle it. When it's all over, we pull the local guys out. Next one happens, put those locals in, etc. We now have the ability to perform what we just did at a more efficient rate. And I hate to look at this as merely a training exercise, but in a degree, everything we do is simply training for the next time we do it. I've never met a baby that was good at flat roofing, as the saying goes. We always seek perfection through progress, or excellence through progress, if you will. It's the idea of these newer heights of ourselves and our community. We can only reach them through effort and through consistency. So as far as what we're going to do in the future, it means tighter coordination, better understanding and more experience, and just having the ability to raise funds, get the supplies we need, and get them on the ground and in action sooner. That's the AFA. And having the training and the men that are willing to drop what they need to do and jump into it, that is the Odinic Order. So hopefully that answers that question.
Awesome. And I appreciate the clarification because, these young men these young men on the screen with me represent some of the very best of our folk, especially our younger guys. A lot of our younger guys, and we talked about this on the last time I appeared on the program. We were talking about, reforging Gimli or forging Gimli in our own lives. A lot of guys, see the state of the current world of modern society and just complain and just go into this doom spiral thing. What I see from these two guys, the Tylers, as we like to call them, is guys who want to take action. And rather than get sucked into the, doom porn and woe is me mentality and we don't stand a chance, these guys are out here doing stuff, real life stuff. And just like this disaster relief, that's actually doing something. That is putting their words into action. We said it earlier, and I apologize for speaking over Heinlein when he mentioned the Thorshoff motto: "Words are wind and deeds are iron." There are many people out there who don't believe in what we believe. Fine. They might find what we believe a little intimidating and scary. Fine. But you won't find any of our deeds that we do that put this religious aspect, this religious concept into action. You can't show us what we do that's so scary because we actually do good things. And that's the thing. If you don't like our beliefs, cool, but at least judge us by our deeds. And our deeds confirm our nobility. Whether it's this disaster relief that these two young men headed up, whether it's the toy giveaways at the Hoffs for the winter holidays, or the food giveaways that we do every month, to poor folks around our Hoffs. Those are the things that we do because we don't just want to be good neighbors. We are good neighbors because we are noble, because we are just good people. So again, judge us by what we do, not by what we believe. If you don't like what we believe, cool, but judge us by what we do, because this is Asatru is an active religion. It's an active spirituality. We worship through what we do, and our ancestors judge us in the next life by our deeds. Right? Whether or not they find us worthy to accept us into their halls, they're not going to look. They're not going to just look inside our hearts. While that's very important, but they're going to look at what we've been out there doing with our hands and out there doing with the spoken word and spreading the message of our faith. It's a faith based on love of each other, love of our gods, and love of those who came before us. So I don't see any more questions rolling in. Let me take a minute to plug our upcoming national event, Feast of the Einherjar. Nick, if you would throw that up on the screen.
Whitten Young.
Mm-hmm.
There is one more in there. I don't know if you want to answer that one or not.
I'll get back to it. I'll get back to it in just a second. But yeah, for those of you who haven't registered for Feast of the Einherjar, go to the link shown on the screen. Get yourselves registered. Set to be an outstanding event. It'll be hosted by Gothi Nathan Erlinson. You can expect appearances by Asatru Folk Assembly founder Stephen McNallen. Also here at Gothi Matt Flavel, Whitten Cliff Erickson, and Whitten Brandy Fassett will be there, among many, many, many others. Okay, so that question that I missed was asked by Winnis McGump. And I hope I'm saying that right. Aren't you guys doing stuff with PF? Someone in PF that you guys are pretty. Someone in PF told me that you guys are pretty active, and I guess PF means Patriot Front. So if our guys were on the ground doing relief work with those guys, and those guys were doing relief work with our guys, but outside of that, that's about the extent of it. The AFA is a church. Patriot Front guys are doing other stuff, and more power to them. So with that, I'm gonna leave the floor open to both Tylers to leave us with some parting words. Tyler Bethea, what would you like the folk to take away from this conversation?
So the first thing is I would like to once again to thank everybody for your generosity and for everything that you've put into this, effort. I'm kind of biased on this because it's my community. These are my neighbors. These are the people I work with, that I go to my kids to go to school with and such. You have made a tremendous, impact on these folks. These folks felt pretty isolated. They felt like nobody cared. They felt like this was a very regional event. They look at the news, and granted, it is an election year and people are already early voting. So the news has got a lot more stuff to focus on than a bunch of poor people in Appalachia. But you will never know how much of an impact you have had on hundreds of lives. That's not to say that, we reached hundreds of people with our actions here, because we didn't. We reached a few dozen for sure. But you have made a tremendous, impact with your donations, with your prayers, and with your time. Like I said, we've got a guy on the ground now who's an AFA guy who he's been here for 2 weeks, and he's going to be here for an untold amount of time. He's in between jobs, so he's got all the time in the world. He has a roof over his head. He's got food. He's got gas money, and he's just helping folks. So again, I appreciate every one of you. And if you want to do some work, if Nick will put my contact, information on the screen again, you let me know if you want to come out and you want to help. We can use you. I'll put you to work. You don't have to have any kind of specialized experience or skills or any of that. But if you've got anything you want to donate resource wise, there was a guy in the chat who he talked about how his business has got a lot of propane tanks. We'll use them. Get a hold of me at my email address on the screen. If you want to come up here to volunteer your time and your labor, we can absolutely use you. So just I appreciate all of you and all of your generosity and all that you do for our folk. Don't ever think that what you're doing is too small of an impact. There's no such thing. If you do anything, it's more than doing nothing. The majority of people are doing absolutely nothing. They're looking at the news and they're saying, "Oh, that's terrible. Did you see that the North Koreans are deploying troops to Ukraine? Let's go focus on that." Well, let's focus on our people. Let's focus on them. Our victories, our defeats, the things that hurt us, and the things that elevate us. All of these things are important. And that's what we need to focus on. So I appreciate all of you, and that's all I've got.
All right, Mr. Heinlein, any words before we depart?
Absolutely. So, first and foremost, the people that we were able to reach and get to know and work with while we were out there, it is doubtful that you are seeing this, but if you are, just know that we really appreciate the opportunity to help get you guys back on your feet, and we know that you are the type of people that will do the same in the future for others. Do not feel that that charity takes you down a notch at all. You would have done it for me. I'm doing it for you. When the time comes, do it for the next guy. To those of you that donated, I cannot express how much that made a difference. The relief efforts for the hurricane, be it rescue and recovery, packing supplies in, dealing tree work, getting fences repaired, all of these things, from the showboat heroics to the mundane work that had to be done in order to get people's livelihoods back on track, it changed lives. And in many cases, it saved lives. The supplies you donated, the tools that you donated, the funds that you donated that were then converted into commodities, supplies, and tools changed lives. When we talk about being Asatru, you have two choices. You can talk or you can do. This is your opportunity, if you are not actively living Asatru, to reassess and begin. When we talk about the black pill, we talk about, oh, woe is me, life is bad. Understand that that is your responsibility to change. Understand that we are here to help you. We will give you tools and tips and tricks. We will help you get your life back on track. But at the end of the day, if you want it, you will do it. If you think you want it, but you don't do it, then you didn't want it. At the end of the day, all of this comes down to one fundamental concept. If you have the ability to respond, you have the responsibility to do so. Live Asatru and hail victory.
So I want to touch a little bit
Hail
on
victory.
that. No, everybody's ability to put boots on the ground varies. If you can't be there, help the guys who are there. Reach in your pockets and donate. Send supplies. Send support. Even if you've got guys, like I said, you can't be there, or maybe you don't even have funds to help out. Maybe you know somebody in the area that would be interested in helping them out. Now, we've got guys all in that Piedmont, South Carolina. I saw a few of them up there involved in it. Not all of them had money to donate. Maybe you know somebody that lives close by that has no interest in Asatru, but they got a chainsaw and they might want to help out. Reach out to that guy. Tell them, you got friends up there that are in need. Motivate them. We're all in this together. Gentlemen, I can't express to you how proud we all are of the efforts that you put in. Like I said, I've got a personal connection to both these guys, and swollen with pride about them rolling up their sleeves and getting out there and getting the stuff done. Asatru's about action. Asatru's about doing. And these guys out here were out on the road doing. And we appreciate that. Hail the ICL. Hail the folk. Hail the Asatru Folk Assembly. And remember, victory never sleeps. Good night, guys.